Maria stepped out of the small bus and looked up at the tall hotel building in front of her.
I need to speak to the manager
Her eyes
immediately.
were tired, her clothes were simple, and her old suitcase had scratches on every corner. Anyone passing by would think she was just another traveler who had walked a long road. But the truth was something no one in that lobby could even imagine. The hotel was hers. Every floor, every room, every polished light in that building belonged to her. She had built it with her own hands, through years of sacrifice, long nights, and endless work. But today, she did not look like the owner at all. She looked like a tired single mom who needed a place to rest for one night. Maria had been away for months, traveling for business and handling problems in different cities. She decided to come home without calling the hotel first. She wanted to see how her workers treated guests when no one was watching. She wanted to know if they still held the values she had taught them from the beginning: kindness, respect, and honesty. But as soon as she pushed open the glass doors, she felt the heavy air in the lobby. It felt cold, unfriendly, like something had changed in her absence. She walked slowly toward the front desk. The receptionist, a young man with shiny hair and a fancy suit, looked up at her. For a moment, he had a normal smile on his face, the kind a staff member should show every guest. But when his eyes scanned her clothes, her simple shoes, and her old suitcase, the smile slowly disappeared. His whole attitude changed in a second. Instead of welcoming her, he raised an eyebrow like he was annoyed that she had walked in. Maria noticed everything. She had spent years watching people, learning how they behaved, studying how they treated others. Just from the receptionist's eyes, she could tell he thought she was poor. He thought she did not belong in this fancy hotel. He thought she was someone easy to ignore. She walked up to the counter quietly. "Hello," she said softly. "I would like a room, please." The receptionist did not respond right away. Instead, he looked her up and down again, this time slower, like he was trying to decide what to do. In his head, she was not a valuable guest. She did not look rich enough to stay there. She did not look important. And so he gave her the kind of stare that stabbed like a knife, cold, sharp, disrespectful. "What type of room?" he finally asked, but the way he spoke made it clear he did not want her there. Maria kept her expression calm. She was used to battles, used to life pushing her down and forcing her to stand up again. A rude receptionist was nothing compared to what she had survived as a single mother. But still, it hurt her that the hotel she worked so hard for had become this kind of place, where appearance mattered more than kindness. Before she could answer, two women sitting in the lobby whispered loudly, clearly wanting her to hear. "Look at her clothes," one of them said. "She probably can't afford a night here." The other woman laughed softly. "She looks like she walked straight out of a cheap area. Why would she come to a hotel like this?" Their voices cut through the air. Maria felt their words like small stones thrown at her, but she stayed silent. She wanted to see how far this would go. She wanted to see how her staff behaved when they thought she was just a tired stranger. Behind the counter, the receptionist typed slowly on the computer, but his movements were lazy, careless. He was not checking anything seriously. He already knew what he was going to say, even before he pretended to look. "We're full," he said after a moment, giving her a fake sympathetic smile. "No rooms available." Maria looked behind him. There was a large board filled with room keys. At least 10 were still hanging there. She knew the hotel was not full. She knew he was lying. And she knew exactly why, because he looked at her like she did not deserve to be there. For a moment, she stayed quiet. Around her, more people stared at her suitcase, her shoes, her messy hair. Not one person looked at her with kindness. It felt strange to stand inside her own hotel and be treated like she was nothing. But Maria did not show anger. She did not raise her voice. She did not reveal who she was. Her calmness made the scene even more suspenseful. She simply nodded, as if she believed the receptionist's lie. Then she stepped aside and sat on one of the lobby chairs. The receptionist whispered something to another staff member, and both of them laughed quietly. Maria heard every word. "Why do these poor people come here?" he said. "This is not a charity." Maria's hands curled slightly into fists, but she kept her face gentle. Deep inside, something began to grow, not anger, but a quiet strength. The kind of strength that comes before a storm. The workers had no idea who she was. They had no idea that the tired woman sitting on the lobby chair was the one person who could end all their careers with a single sentence. They looked at her like trash. But soon, very soon, they would regret every second of it. Maria sat quietly in the lobby chair, her suitcase beside her, watching the receptionist pretend to be busy. She knew he was lying about the rooms being full. Anyone with eyes could see the board of room keys behind him. But he didn't care. In his mind, she didn't look like someone worth serving. She didn't look rich enough or important enough. And because of that, he felt confident treating her like she didn't matter at all. A few minutes passed. Guests came and went. The receptionist greeted them with bright smiles and warm voices. But every time he looked at Maria, his face turned cold again. It was as if she carried a disease he didn't want to catch. He whispered to another worker, and both of them laughed quietly. It stung, but Maria kept her pain hidden. She didn't come here to fight. Not yet. She came to see the truth. And the truth was already loud and clear. After a while, Maria stood up and returned to the counter. She placed her hand gently on the desk. "Are you sure," she asked softly, "that there are no rooms available?" The receptionist didn't even look at the keys. He simply smiled like he was talking to a child. "Yes, ma'am. We're full. Completely full." Maria wanted to ask why he was lying. But before she could speak, he added something worse. "You should try the motel across the street. It's more suitable for people like you. People like you." Those 3 words cut deeper than everything else he had said. Maria felt her chest tighten. She had heard those words before in her life, words used to push her down, to make her feel small, to remind her of every struggle she went through as a single mother. She had fought for years to give her child a better life. She had worked double shifts, skipped meals, and slept only a few hours each night. She had built this hotel trying to prove she could rise above all those painful moments. And now, standing in front of the hotel she owned, she was being thrown right back into those memories. The receptionist shrugged, bored. "If you can't afford this place, you should say it. No need to waste my time." Maria blinked slowly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. She was disappointed. Shocked. How much had her staff changed while she was gone? How long had they been treating guests this way? What had her hotel become? She took a deep breath and asked one more time. "Can I speak to your manager?" The receptionist rolled his eyes dramatically. He clicked his tongue and called out loudly, "Manager to the front desk. Someone's complaining." His tone was mocking, like he wanted everyone in the lobby to know she was bothering him. Maria lowered her gaze. She wasn't embarrassed, she was watching, listening, gathering every detail. This was her hotel. Her responsibility. Every rude action she saw was a sign of a deeper problem, a bigger failure happening behind her back. A tall man with a shiny badge reading "Manager" walked out from a side office. He had a stiff posture and a proud smile, the kind of smile a person wears when they think they own the place. He didn't even glance at Maria before speaking. "What's the issue now?" The receptionist pointed at Maria casually. "She wants a room. I told her we're full. Now she's demanding to talk to you." The manager finally looked at her. And the instant he saw her worn clothes and old suitcase, his expression hardened. Respect vanished from his face before it could even appear. "We are full," he said firmly. "Please leave." You're blocking the counter. Maria's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm blocking the counter. Yes, the manager snapped. And we don't have time for this. There are real guests waiting. Real guests. People like you. The insults kept stacking up. Not one person in that lobby saw her as human. Not one person imagined she could be someone of value. Maria looked around the room. Some guests glanced at her, but none stepped forward. People sometimes became blind when they thought someone was below them. I understand, Maria whispered. She stepped aside, but not because she accepted their words. She stepped aside because she knew something they didn't. Their time was running out. The manager turned away from her and said loudly, "Next." Maria held her suitcase tightly and walked toward a corner of the lobby. But before she reached the chair, a soft voice behind her said, "Ma'am, please wait." She turned slowly. A young worker, maybe 19 or 20, stood behind her. The girl looked nervous, almost scared, as her eyes studied Maria's face carefully. Maria saw recognition in those eyes. The girl knew her. The girl opened her mouth to speak, but her voice shook. "Ma'am. I think they made a mistake. Please don't leave yet." Maria's heartbeat changed. Someone finally understood who she was. Someone finally saw the truth. And this moment, this was where everything would begin to turn. Maria turned slowly toward the young worker, the only person in the entire lobby who seemed to see her as something more than a poor stranger. The girl looked frightened, as if she was doing something dangerous just by speaking to Maria. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she kept glancing over her shoulder to make sure the manager wasn't watching. "Do you remember me?" the girl whispered. Maria studied her face closely. The girl had soft eyes, gentle features, and a nervous way of holding herself. And then, suddenly, the memory hit her like a quick flash of light. Yes, she remembered. This was the same girl who had once come to her office crying, years ago, begging for a job because her mother was sick and she needed money for treatment. Maria had hired her immediately. She had even helped pay for the mother's medicine. At that moment, Maria realized something painfully obvious. If this girl was scared, then something was very wrong in her hotel. Staff were not supposed to be scared of kindness. They were supposed to feel safe. Maria nodded gently. "Yes. I remember you." The girl covered her mouth as if she might cry. "Ma'am. I knew it was you the moment you walked in. I recognized your eyes." Her voice trembled, and she leaned closer. "But, please don't tell them yet. Please don't say anything right now." Maria felt her heartbeat grow heavy. "Why not?" The girl's answer came out as a whisper filled with fear. "Because they became cruel after you left. They treat people badly. They lie to guests. They take money under the table. And if they find out you're here, they will panic. They will try to hide everything. You won't see the truth." Maria felt a cold chill run through her chest. So it was true. Her hotel, the one she built from nothing, had turned into a place of greed and arrogance. A place where kindness had disappeared. A place where guests were judged by their clothes instead of their hearts. She looked at the girl with deep sadness. "Did they treat you badly too?" The girl looked down at her hands. "Yes, but I'm scared to lose my job. My mom is still sick sometimes. I can't complain. I have to stay quiet." Those words broke Maria's heart even more than the receptionist's insults. Because the entire purpose of the hotel was to give people jobs, safety, and respect. It was meant to be a place of hope. A place where no one would feel scared to speak. The girl continued in a trembling voice, "Ma'am, the hotel is not full. There are many empty rooms. I clean them every day. They lied to you because they think you're a poor traveler." Maria took a deep breath. She expected that part, but hearing it from a frightened employee made it real. Made it painful. "I understand," Maria whispered. The girl hesitated, then suddenly leaned closer and lowered her voice even more. "You should have seen how they talked about you after you sat down. They called you names. They laughed at your suitcase. They said people like you shouldn't even walk into the lobby." For the first time, Maria felt a small sting of real hurt, deep, sharp, and personal. Not because they insulted her looks. Not because they mistook her for someone lesser. But because they had turned her dream into something ugly. The girl looked at her with tears in her eyes. "When you were here before, everyone was kind. Everyone respected every guest. You used to help people. You used to talk to us like we mattered. But now, everything is different." Maria placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "Thank you for telling me." The girl shook her head quickly. "I'm only telling you because, you deserve to know the truth. And because I remember what you did for me. Without you, my mom would have," her voice cracked. She couldn't continue. Maria nodded softly. She understood. She remembered. But before she could say another word, a voice boomed from behind them. "What is going on here?" "The manager." He walked toward them with quick, angry steps. His eyes were locked on the girl, not Maria. "Why are you talking to her? You were told to clean room 405 10 minutes ago." The girl's face turned white as snow. She backed away instantly, bowing her head like a scared child. I'm sorry, sir. I was just..." The manager cut her off sharply. "I don't want excuses. Go. Now." She looked at Maria one last time, her eyes silently begging for forgiveness. Then she hurried away, clutching her cleaning supplies tightly against her chest. The manager then turned to Maria with a cold smile. "Was she bothering you? She talks too much sometimes. Don't mind her." Maria stared at him without blinking. This man had no idea who he was insulting. No idea who stood in front of him. No idea how close he was to losing everything. "Sir," Maria said quietly, "I asked for a room. Are you sure none are available?" The manager folded his arms. "I already told you. We're full. And I would appreciate it if you stop asking." Maria didn't argue. She didn't need to. Because now she knew everything she came to find out, how they lied, how they judged, how they treated the weak. And she knew exactly what she was going to do next. This time, the storm inside her was no longer silent. It was ready. The manager stood with his arms crossed, staring at Maria with impatience, as if she was wasting his precious time. He didn't know that the woman he was disrespecting was the reason he even had a job. He didn't know that the floors beneath his feet, the walls around him, the desk he leaned on, all of it existed because of her. But he continued speaking to her like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. Maria stayed calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply watched him with the same quiet expression she had worn since she stepped inside the hotel. But inside her chest, something heavy was tightening. This was not anger. This was disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than hate ever could. The manager tapped his fingers on the desk. "If you're done standing here, please leave the lobby. You're making the guests uncomfortable." Maria looked around. Not a single guest seemed bothered. In fact, a few looked curious, sensing tension in the air. But the manager had already decided what story he wanted to believe. She didn't move. She didn't leave. That made him even more irritated. "I said," he repeated, speaking loudly so everyone could hear, "you need to leave." Maria tilted her head slightly, her eyes steady. "And if I don't?" The manager blinked, surprised that she dared to question him. "Then I'll call security." "That won't be necessary," Maria said calmly. He misunderstood her tone completely. He thought she was finally giving up. He smirked and took a step back, satisfied. Good. Then please. But before he could finish, the elevator dinged. Everyone turned. A group of businessmen stepped out, laughing loudly as they joked with each other. The manager instantly straightened his suit and rushed toward them with fake politeness. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How was your conference? Everything comfortable? Anything we can do to improve your stay? The businessmen barely acknowledged him. But they noticed Maria standing alone at the counter. One of them stepped toward her. Miss, do you need help? You look tired. The manager quickly cut between them. She doesn't have a reservation, he said sharply. She's leaving. The businessman frowned. Leaving? Why? She can't afford the rooms, the manager replied without hesitation. A few people in the lobby gasped. Even the businessman looked shocked for a moment. He shook his head and walked away, whispering under his breath, "That's unprofessional." But the manager didn't care. He returned to Maria with a proud smile, thinking he had protected his hotel. Maria's eyes followed the businessman as he walked toward the exit. She wasn't hurt by the words spoken about her appearance, she had faced far worse in her life. But she felt something else. Shame. Shame that her hotel had become a place where people were judged by money instead of character. She finally spoke. What if I told you I could afford any room here? The manager laughed openly. Ma'am, if you could afford a room, you wouldn't be dragging that old suitcase. You're clearly, well, you know. Maria's voice stayed steady. I don't know. Why don't you tell me? He lowered his voice and leaned forward as if sharing a secret. You're not the kind of guest we want. You're not good for business. For the first time since arriving, Maria felt something break inside her. Not because of his words, but because the hotel she loved had fallen so far from what she built. Before she could speak, another voice suddenly joined the moment. Is there a problem? It was the young housekeeper again. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear. But this time, she wasn't scared for herself. She was scared for the manager. The manager snapped at her immediately. Didn't I tell you to clean room 405? Why are you here again? The girl swallowed hard. Sir, you're making a mistake. The manager's face turned red. A mistake? Excuse me. The girl looked at Maria nervously, then back at him. You shouldn't talk to her like that. The manager laughed harshly. What? Should I treat her like a queen? The girl's voice dropped into a whisper that carried across the lobby. Yes. The manager froze mid-laugh. What did you say? The girl stepped closer and whispered loudly enough for the guests near them to hear. Because she's the owner. Silence fell instantly. The manager stared at her like she had spoken a forbidden word. What nonsense are you talking about? This woman. The owner. Don't be ridiculous. But the young girl nodded, her hands trembling. I'm not joking. I've seen her before. She hired me. She paid for my mother's treatment. She built this place. Guests began whispering. The businessmen at the door stopped walking. Even the receptionist turned pale. Maria didn't confirm it. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, watching the color drain from the manager's face. And then, for the first time since Maria had arrived, the manager looked unsure. Scared. Because deep inside, he knew something was wrong. And the girl's trembling honesty made the words feel real. He turned to Maria slowly. This isn't true. Right? Maria didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence around her said everything. And the manager suddenly felt cold all over. Because if the girl was telling the truth, Then he had just insulted the one person who could destroy his entire career with a single sentence. The lobby had turned silent, so silent that even the air felt heavy. The manager stood frozen, staring at Maria as if seeing her for the first time in his life. The receptionist swallowed hard, his face pale, his earlier arrogance melting away like ice under fire. The young housekeeper stood behind them, trembling but brave, her eyes fixed on Maria, silently hoping she had done the right thing. Maria didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply stood there with her old suitcase beside her, looking calm and quiet. But her silence was more powerful than anything she could have said. It filled the room with tension so thick that no one dared to breathe too loudly. Finally, the manager found his voice. This girl must be confused, he said, pointing at the housekeeper. She is young. She doesn't know what she's talking about. There's no way you are the owner. He tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. No one laughed with him. Maria lifted one eyebrow slowly, the only sign of expression she showed. The manager stiffened, afraid of what that small gesture meant. Desperate to regain control, he turned to the housekeeper angrily. You! Go to the back office. Now! You are causing trouble. I'm telling the truth, the girl said softly, her voice shaking but steady. You always told us to treat every guest with respect. But you never followed that rule. She did. She always followed it. I know her face. She is the owner. The manager's face twisted in anger and fear. He leaned toward the girl and whispered sharply, "You're going to lose your job for this nonsense." Maria stepped forward immediately. Enough. The single word hit the room like a hammer. The manager froze mid-sentence. The girl gasped softly. Even the receptionist stood straight like a soldier hearing a general speak. For the first time, Maria's voice carried weight, a quiet, controlled strength that made it impossible to ignore her. The manager turned to her with a forced smile. "Ma'am. I think you're misunderstanding." But Maria raised her hand slightly, and he stopped talking at once. She looked at him directly, and her eyes were calm but sharp. "You said something earlier," she said. "You said I was not the kind of guest you wanted. That I am not good for business. That I made the lobby look bad." The manager opened his mouth to speak, but she didn't let him. "Tell me," she asked, "what makes someone good enough for this place?" He stuttered. I didn't mean." "Yes," Maria said quietly. "You did." Her voice didn't rise, but the truth in her tone sliced through him. His lips shook as he searched for an excuse, but none came. Maria turned her attention to the receptionist next. "You lied to me," she said simply. "Twice." He lowered his head in shame. His hands trembled on the desk. I thought." "Yes," Maria said. "You thought I looked poor. And you decided poor people don't deserve kindness." The receptionist's breathing turned shaky. Maria then looked around the lobby. Guests were watching closely, whispering to one another. Some were shocked, some embarrassed, and some suddenly realized how unfair the staff had been. She looked back at the manager. "Let me tell you something," she said softly. "I built this hotel so people, no matter how they look, could walk inside and feel welcomed. I built it so single mothers, tired travelers, or anyone in need would be treated with respect. But you," she paused, letting her words sink deep. "You turned it into a place where people are judged. Where kindness is replaced with pride. Where guests are insulted for not looking rich enough." Her voice never rose, but each sentence struck harder than any shout could. The manager's hand started shaking. "Ma'am, please." "You don't get to call me ma'am now," Maria said. "Not after calling me a burden. Not after insulting me to my face." The young housekeeper took a small step forward. "Ma'am, should I bring the documents to show them?" Maria nodded gently. Yes. The girl hurried away, and in less than a minute, she returned with a thin black folder, Maria's original ownership papers. The manager's breathing hitched as the girl opened the folder and held it up for the lobby to see. Maria's name was printed clearly on every page. Her signature repeated again and again. The manager stepped back, his entire body trembling. This can't be real. But it was. And everyone knew it. Maria finally spoke the words that froze every heartbeat in the room. I am the owner of this hotel. The lobby shook with silence. The receptionist's knees almost buckled. The manager's face turned white. A few guests gasped. The young girl lowered her eyes respectfully. Maria stood tall, her tired suitcase beside her, looking more powerful than any queen could. And the manager felt something he had never felt before. Pure regret. Regret so big, it swallowed his words, crushed his pride, and forced him to face the truth. He had just destroyed his career with his own arrogance. The lobby stood frozen after Maria's words echoed through it. I am the owner of this hotel. The sentence hung in the air like a thunderclap. No one moved. No one spoke. The manager stared at her with wide, panic-filled eyes. The receptionist's mouth slowly opened as if he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Even the guests standing near the elevator had stopped in their tracks, shocked into complete silence. Maria didn't enjoy the fear written across their faces. She didn't want people to tremble when she spoke. She had never built the hotel to create fear. She built it to create safety. Comfort. Respect. And yet the people running it in her absence had turned it into something ugly. Slowly, she picked up the black folder from the young housekeeper's hands. She opened it, her fingers brushing the edges of the documents she had signed years ago. Her name glowed clearly on every page. The staff stared at the papers as if they were seeing the truth printed in fire. The manager wiped sweat from his forehead. His voice shook. Ma'am, please. You have to understand. I didn't know it was you. I thought. Maria closed the folder softly. You thought I was beneath you. He flinched as if the words were a slap. She continued, her voice steady. You thought a woman with a simple suitcase didn't deserve your respect. You thought someone who looked tired couldn't be important. The manager tried again, stumbling over his words. Ma'am, I swear, I would never. You already did, Maria said gently but firmly. Her calmness was more terrifying than anger. The receptionist stepped forward, nearly tripping over his own feet. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. Maria turned her gaze toward him. You lied to me. Twice. You told me the hotel was full, even when keys were hanging behind you. His face turned red. I thought. You thought poor people shouldn't stay in this hotel, she said. He froze. He couldn't deny it. Everyone had heard him. The manager lifted his hands helplessly. Ma'am, please. Just, give us a chance to explain. Maria took a slow breath. She looked around the lobby, the marble floors, the polished counters, the expensive furniture. She remembered the day this hotel opened, when she had stood in this very spot with tears in her eyes, proud of what she created. She remembered telling her first employees, this place will not be like other hotels. We treat everyone with kindness, rich or poor. What happened to that promise? She turned back to the manager. I trusted my staff. I trusted you. And this is how you represent my name. By insulting guests. By lying. By humiliating people who look tired or poor. The manager dropped his gaze. He had no answer. Ma'am, he whispered, trembling. Please. I need this job. I have a family. I didn't mean harm. Maria's expression softened only slightly. She knew desperation when she heard it. She had lived through it herself. But excuses didn't erase the truth. Before she could respond, the young housekeeper stepped forward again. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was strong. "Ma'am, this is not the first time," she said quietly. "They treat many guests this way. Anyone who looks poor. Anyone who comes alone. Anyone who doesn't look rich enough. The manager snapped at her, panic in his tone. "Stop lying." The girl stepped back fearfully, but Maria placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let her speak." The manager swallowed hard, realizing he had just made another mistake. The girl continued. "They also take extra money from some guests. They force housekeepers to clean more rooms than allowed. They yell at us. They threaten to fire anyone who complains." Maria closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the weight of the truth. Every word from the girl was a punch to her heart. This hotel, her dream, had become a place where kindness was replaced with fear. Where staff were treated like machines. Where guests were judged like criminals. She opened her eyes again, filled with a kind of sadness that cut deeper than anger. "Thank you," Maria said to the girl softly. "For telling the truth." The manager tried one last time to regain control. "Ma'am, she is lying. You know how young employees can be. Emotional. Dramatic." Maria slowly turned her head toward him. The look in her eyes stopped him mid-sentence. No anger. No hatred. Just disappointment so deep that it made him step back. "Pack your things," Maria said quietly. "You are done here." The manager's legs gave out slightly. "Ma'am, please. Don't do this. I promise I will change. You should have been different without needing threats," she said. "Respect comes from character, not fear." The receptionist took a step back as Maria looked at him. "You too. Escort him out, and then go with him." He burst into tears. "Ma'am, please. I need this job. I have nowhere else to." "So did the guests you insulted," Maria replied. The lobby was silent again, but this time, the silence felt clean. Honest. Necessary. The manager and receptionist walked away slowly, their heads low, their regret heavy like chains around their necks. Maria watched them go, not with hatred, but with clarity. This hotel would change. Starting now. The manager and the receptionist walked toward the exit like two men going to their own funeral. The lobby watched them in stunned silence. Their confident steps had turned into weak, shaky movements. Their pride, once loud and sharp, was now crushed under the weight of their own actions. Maria didn't look away. She watched them with steady eyes, not celebrating their downfall, not enjoying their fear. Her expression held something heavier, something deeper, truth. A truth she had ignored for too long. As they reached the door, the manager paused and looked back one last time. His face was pale, his voice small. "Ma'am. I'm sorry." And for the first time, he didn't sound arrogant. He didn't sound defensive. He sounded human, just a scared man who finally understood his mistake. Maria nodded once, but she did not take back her decision. "I hope you learned something important today," she said quietly. Then they stepped outside, and the glass doors closed behind them. The tension in the lobby melted slowly, replaced by a heavy feeling of realization. The guests whispered among themselves, processing what they had witnessed. Some were shocked. Some were impressed. And some felt guilty, remembering how they themselves had judged Maria when she walked in tired and dressed simply. The young housekeeper stood nearby, her hands clasped tightly. She looked scared again, scared not for herself, but for what might come next. Would Maria be angry at the whole staff? Would she shut down the hotel? Would she fire everyone? Maria turned toward her, and the girl stiffened. "Come here," Maria said gently. The girl approached slowly, like a child expecting punishment. But Maria reached out and took her hand softly. "You did something very brave today." The girl's eyes instantly filled with tears. I didn't want to cause trouble." "You didn't cause trouble," Maria said. "You revealed it." The girl let out a shaky breath and wiped her eyes. I didn't want you to leave thinking no one cared about the hotel anymore." Maria squeezed her hand. "Your honesty means more to me than anything else that happened today." Some guests stepped closer now, unsure but curious. One older woman spoke up. "Ma'am, I didn't know you were the owner. I feel embarrassed for judging you." Maria smiled softly. "It's all right. We all judge without realizing it sometimes. What matters is how we treat others." Another guest nodded. "The way they spoke to you, it was wrong. You handled it with so much grace." Maria took a slow breath. "It wasn't grace. It was disappointment. I never wanted this place to become a hotel where people feel small." The lobby fell quiet again, but now it was a warm silence, not the cold one from before. Maria looked around at the remaining staff, housekeepers, cleaners, bellboys, kitchen workers. They all stood at a distance, watching her carefully, unsure of what their future held. She walked toward them. Their backs straightened instantly. A bellboy stepped forward nervously. "Ma'am, we didn't know what was happening. We always tried our best." Maria saw the fear on their faces, not the fear of losing a job, but the fear of disappointing her. She remembered training some of them herself. She remembered their first days, their effort, their loyalty. Not everyone in the hotel had turned into the manager. She spoke clearly. "Listen to me. I'm not here to punish all of you. I know many of you work hard. I know many of you treat guests with kindness. And I know some of you are afraid to speak up." The staff exchanged emotional glances. "I'm not shutting this hotel down," Maria continued. "But things will change, starting today." The housekeepers nodded quickly. The bellboys sighed in relief. Some even smiled. Maria lifted her chin slightly. "There will be new rules. Real rules. Rules I put in place years ago but were forgotten." She walked back toward the center of the lobby. "First, no guest is to be judged by their appearance. Ever." Several staff members nodded with determination. "Second, if a guest looks tired, alone, or scared, you treat them with twice the kindness." The young housekeeper wiped another tear. "Third, we will begin full staff training again. Everyone will learn how to treat people with respect, no matter who they are." The staff exchanged hopeful looks now. Maria paused for a moment, letting her words sink into the walls of the hotel she had built. "And lastly," she added, her voice warm and strong, "every staff member should feel safe here. If you are mistreated by a manager or coworker, you speak to me directly. No more fear. No more silence." The girl who had defended her covered her face, overwhelmed. Another staff member placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Guests clapped softly, then louder, until the entire lobby filled with applause, not out of pity, not out of shock, but out of respect. Maria looked around slowly. The hotel felt different already. Brighter. Lighter. Almost like the building itself was relieved. And in that moment, everyone knew. This hotel had finally returned to its true owner. Maria stood in the center of the lobby, watching the applause slowly fade. But what remained afterward was even more powerful than clapping, the warm, hopeful silence of people who finally understood the heart of the woman before them. The lobby that once felt cold and cruel now felt alive again, as if the building itself could breathe. Maria took a quiet breath and let her eyes move across the room. Everything looked the same as it had when she walked in, the same furniture, the same lights, the same polished floor. But the atmosphere had changed completely. It no longer felt like a place where people were judged. It felt like a place where people were seen. She walked back to her old suitcase, the one the receptionist mocked. She touched the worn handle and smiled softly. This suitcase had been with her through every struggle. Through nights she slept in cheap rooms. Through mornings when she couldn't afford breakfast. Through days she walked miles without rest. It was old and scratched, but it told her story, her real story. A story no one in this lobby had known when she walked in. The young housekeeper approached her timidly. "Ma'am, would you like me to take your suitcase to your suite?" Maria looked at her with gentle eyes. "No, dear. I want to carry it myself." The girl nodded, understanding the unspoken meaning. This suitcase was not a burden. It was a reminder. Maria lifted it with both hands. It felt heavier than before, but in a good way, like it carried not just clothes, but the truth that had been finally revealed. She walked toward the elevator, and people respectfully stepped aside, creating a clear path for her. Even the guests who were strangers to her smiled warmly as she passed. A few whispered words of admiration. One older guest even bowed slightly. The hotel felt united, almost like a family gathering around its long-lost mother. The elevator doors opened quietly. As Maria stepped inside, the young housekeeper called out softly, "Ma'am, thank you for coming back." Maria turned, her eyes shining. "Thank you for reminding me what this hotel is meant to be." The doors closed gently, and Maria rode up in silence. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished elevator walls, a tired woman, yes, but strong. A woman who had carried her life alone for years. A woman who had built something beautiful, lost it, and now reclaimed it. When the elevator reached the top floor, the doors opened to the quiet luxury of the executive hallway. Her suite was the last door on the left. She had designed this hallway herself. She remembered choosing the colors, picking the carpets, making sure the lights looked soft and comforting. She walked to her suite door, touched the golden room number, and felt a wave of emotion rise inside her. This was the suite they said was not available for people like you. Yet it had always belonged to her. She slid the keycard the young housekeeper had secretly handed her earlier. The door clicked open. The suite looked exactly as she remembered, a large king bed, a wide window overlooking the city, a soft chair near a lamp where she used to read documents late at night. The air smelled faintly of vanilla, just like she had ordered for her rooms years ago. Maria stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She placed her suitcase on the floor and walked toward the window. The city lights glowed below, alive and bright. She touched the glass gently, her eyes softening. So much had happened today. She had been rejected in her own lobby. Humiliated. Judged. Looked down on. But she had also seen courage, honesty, and kindness, the young housekeeper who risked everything to protect the truth. The guests who apologized. The staff who wanted to do better. Her hotel was broken, yes. But it was not beyond saving. And she, the woman who built it from nothing, would save it again. She sat down on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe deeply. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to feel tired. But it was a peaceful kind of tired. A tiredness that comes not from defeat, but from victory. Outside the window, the night looked calm. Quiet. Beautiful. Maria whispered softly to herself, "I'm home." Those two words carried more power than any sentence she had spoken in the lobby. They meant she was ready to rebuild every broken part of her dream. She stood up, walked to the dresser, and pulled out a notepad. On the first page, she wrote, "New beginning, tomorrow, staff meeting at 9 a.m. Topic: Kindness is our first rule." She smiled and placed the notepad back. This story did not end with revenge. It did not end with anger. It ended with recovery. With truth. With respect. with the return of a woman who refused to let arrogance destroy her dream. And as she lay back on her bed, closing her eyes for a moment, one last thought made her heart warm. Sometimes people don't know who they are hurting. But when the truth is revealed, change becomes possible again. Maria drifted into peaceful sleep, no longer the tired woman who walked into her own hotel unnoticed. She was the owner. And tomorrow, the hotel would rise again, with her at the front, leading it with kindness, strength, and dignity.